Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Charlie's Journey YouTube channel. I'm Charlie. If you are new here, I really hope you'll consider subscribing if you like this type of content. And to my current subscribers, thank you as always for your love and your support. Thank you. Again guys, sorry about Sunday's video being a short thank you video. My throat is still a bit funny, but I cannot hold off filming any more videos. I cannot hold off not filming any more videos, so here we are. Let's get straight into it. Today we're going to be talking about suffering and how somehow when I was a Jehovah's Witness, the concept of suffering somehow equaled success. First of all, we were taught all the exemplary or well thought about, well talked about Bible characters: Noah, Moses, Enoch, any of the popular Bible characters you can think of that were held up as an example, all suffered in some way, shape or form. And that obviously includes Jesus being the ultimate character, Bible character that suffered because he gave up his life for humanity and went through some really terrible things leading up to that. So anybody who we aspired to be like had some kind of suffering backstory behind them. So that's the first thing. For instance, any modern day Jehovah's Witness who has suffered any kind of persecution or suffering is held up as an example of one that has remained faithful to God, and their actions are to be imitated. So any Christians that have been wrongly imprisoned for their faith or stood up for their belief and then been persecuted or suffered in some way, shape or form for being a Christian are seen as a good thing. Now, obviously, there are people I know that will watch my videos that are still religious, and I'm not trying to be offensive because I haven't got any interest in debating anybody's religion or talking about the ins and outs of the rights and wrongs. Again, all of my videos are just talking about my personal experience and what has personally affected me. What has affected me might not affect anybody else, but that teaching, that subconsciously told me that in order for you to be successful as a Christian, in order for you to be worthy and pleasing to God, you had to suffer in some way. We were told that if we wanted to be like Jesus suffered for righteousness' sake or for the sake of the good news. And if we were suffering or going through some kind of hardship in some way, shape or form, it was a good thing because it meant that we were essentially like Jesus. So suffering was never discussed in a way that was something to be shied away from or something that you had to fight to overcome. It almost seemed like the more you suffered, the better you would be, the better your story would be, because again, Jehovah's Witnesses hold annual conventions every year where thousands of them will gather together. 3-day convention of Bible instruction, and as part of that they have videos that are shown with either Bible dramatic stories reenacted or depicted in some way, or they'll have interviews of Christians from around the world talking about their particular stories of suffering that they've gone through and overcome. A good number of them haven't overcome those sufferings, but they're still held up in a good light. And I definitely feel that, for me personally, I personally feel that that's a form of emotional manipulation. Of course, nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to go through any kind of suffering, but when you are fully dedicated to God and you're being told that it's a good thing that you suffering in any kind of way, means that you are pleasing to God and you really want to be pleasing to God, then you will endure whatever suffering you need to go through. And for me, For me, there were a number of occasions where I went through a lot of hard times because of being a witness. And I did briefly mention that I was bullied severely in school when I was growing up, partly because of my skin colour, but the other major factor was the fact that I was a Jehovah's Witness as well. And going out and preaching as a child, knocking on doors and holding your breath every time somebody from school opens that door, knowing that you're going to get it the next week when you go to school and they see you because you went and knocked on their door, and they can tell everybody that they shouted at you and they told you to get lost or worse. So there was those type of things that I went through, which is obviously nothing in comparison to being falsely imprisoned or persecuted, tortured in some way. But I still went through a tough time because I was a Jehovah's Witness child. I still was subject to misery because I was a Jehovah's Witness child. And each time I spoke about it with anybody who was within my congregation at the time, it was seen as, well done, you're doing really well for coping with that, or that's just how it is kind of thing. Like, we're witnesses, we're going to have to suffer as Jesus did. So although it was tough, you kept telling yourself, well, at least by me not retaliating, by me not giving into this situation and saying I can't do this anymore or it's too much for me, by enduring that situation, basically you told yourself, at least I'm making Jehovah happy. Of course, when I left, this teaching, this indoctrination that I was subject to, I had to undo. And I'd love to say that I'm completely over that, but it's taken a while for me to deal with that aspect of. It's been one that I've had to work on, basically. And I'll just quickly go through a couple of things that I had to do. Mentioned before, I'm a single mum with children, so having to learn to ask for help was difficult. Wasn't used to that. Yeah, I had to learn to be kinder to myself. Again, something that was completely contrary to everything I'd learned growing up, which was to be kind to yourself was almost a demonic thing, because when Jesus's disciples, one of them in particular, I think it was Peter, I think Peter had said to him, be kind to yourself, Lord, when Jesus was talking about his fate of being crucified and whatnot. I believe it was Peter said to him, be kind to yourself, Lord, you will not suffer this fate at all, or something like that. Again, it's been a little while, guys. I don't read my Bible like that anymore, but it was something like that, along the lines of be kinder to yourself, you're not going to go through anything like that. And Jesus basically called him the devil and told him that wasn't correct thinking. Not to debate that point for anybody that is religious. I'm not debating that. I'm just mentioning it because it was a scripture that was regularly used to help us to see that being kind to yourself was not what you do. A good Christian wouldn't look to be kind to themselves. They'd be looking at being as selfless as possible. Piggybacking off of that, I had to learn to relax. Sounds really strange, but I had to learn to physically relax, because I came to realize that I was constantly on edge, subconsciously and consciously on edge, due to many different things that I've mentioned before about different teachings, namely the Great Tribulation, Armageddon. I personally believe puts your sympathetic nervous system into fight or flight mode continuously, because you're constantly on edge thinking it could happen any day now. And then when you're also suffering or having to go through hardship because of your faith, on top of that, the tension that you store in your body can be quite immense. So I had to learn to physically relax and find ways to do that so that I could be kinder to myself. I had to learn to stop taking on more than I could handle. I had to learn to stop being a martyr. And that's the only way I can describe it, is that throughout my JW life and the things that I personally suffered as a result of being a JW, I realised that unless I was suffering, unless I was going through hardship, unless I was taking on helping this person, putting myself out for that person, stretching myself to do this, you know, pouring my soul out as a Christian to ensure I was in good standing with God, and also to try to ensure my salvation, try to save my life for the future. It's a constant, it was for me a constant martyrdom, just sacrificing myself, taking on more than was necessary, more than what was possible for me, basically. I had to learn to undo that, and it wasn't easy. It's not been easy. Like I said, I've equated hard work, suffering, and difficulty, essentially. Hardship, struggling, difficulty. I have equated that over the years with being successful, spiritually speaking. So those were some of the main things I had to learn to do in order to try and undo that, trying to be kinder to myself, trying to be more patient, trying to relax, let go, and learn to ask for help. It wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy, because it's like it's hardwired in my brain for such a long time that learning to undo that has not been easy at all. I still fight sometimes the inner voice telling me that that's selfish, you shouldn't do that, you should do this, etc, etc. So it's an ongoing journey. And a side point that I think is another very unhealthy thing that is taught and is part of JW doctrine. And there is a small side point I just wanted to mention that I think is also not helpful, that JWs teach and is part of their doctrine, is the idea that if you're suffering in a marriage, not so much physically, because they do say as a caveat that if you are physically in fear of your life, then you're allowed to separate. But that's just separating. It doesn't mean that you're entitled to a divorce from that person and you can't move on with your life, because you would need to have a scriptural as well as a legal divorce in order for you to be seen as free in God's eyes, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses. So if you're in an abusive marriage, you're again seen as you're seen as exemplary if you stick that situation out, no matter how unhappy you are, no matter how much you're suffering, how much your mental health is not where it should be. You're encouraged to stick that out. Now again, without getting into a debate about marriage and the rights and the wrongs and the Christian values and all of that, because that's not my point, I just don't feel it's healthy to encourage anybody that's in an abusive relationship of any kind, not just marriage, but any close relationship of any kind, where you feel that you're suffering at the hand of another person. I don't think anybody should be encouraged to endure that situation unnecessarily, especially if you have tried. I'm not talking about, because obviously, shouldn't have to explain this, but it seems to be on the internet these days, people like to take things you say incorrectly. So of course it should be self-explanatory that if I'm saying you're in an abusive relationship, that we mean seriously abusive, not minor fallings out or misunderstandings with your husband or wife, or the everyday slights that you get when you're in a marriage with somebody. I don't mean that. I'm talking about abuse, where you're suffering at the hands of somebody else, whether it is mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, whatever. If you are suffering at the hands of another person that you have to spend vast amount of time with, let alone sharing a living space, etc., but you're told that even though your natural, everything in your natural being is telling you how unhappy you are and that this isn't correct, but the religion that means so much to you is telling you that it is correct that you're suffering because you're doing what's right, you're making God happy, you're making, you know, you're imitating Christ. I feel like that causes a lot of mental conflict and anguish, and I don't think it's healthy at all. There is a lot more I could say on this subject, but we haven't got days and days worth of footage I can film regarding it. So I've just given you a brief outline of what I've had to deal with, and it may be an ongoing process for years for me, to be honest, because it's one of the ones I've been working on the longest over the last 4 years, but I'll continue working on it until I feel I've got to a place that I'm very, very happy with. But I am happy with where I am, at least 4 years, nearly 4 years down the line. I am happy with where I am, at least. And yeah, I'm happy with where I am, basically. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, I really hope you'll give it a thumbs up. Share it with anybody that you feel might benefit from it. Thank you, as always, for all your emails. I've been getting some really amazing emails, and you guys are just so lovely. Everyone just keeps telling me, keep it up, and I'm really helping them, and that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted to do, is jump on here and be of help to somebody, be somebody that you guys can relate to with regards to whatever you might be going through. As I said, you might not be an ex-JW, you don't have to be. You may have just gone through some difficulty. I've gone through, if I could sit here and tell you the categories of life things that I've gone through that I could hopefully use to help somebody, yeah, you guys would be like, wow. Anyway, as I said, please like and share. Yeah, so thank you for your support as always, and I will see you on my next video.